Hi, everybody. Welcome to this video. We're going to be chatting a little bit with Chris Locke. And so perhaps, Chris, you could tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and a bit of an introduction.
Absolutely, yeah. So hi, I'm Chris Locke. I'm Managing Director of the Internet Societies Foundation. And what we do is support the Internet Society and its massive global community in all the work they do through philanthropy, training, and revenue generation and communication. So we support all of the work globally that ISOC does.
I'm really very happy to have you actually here with us. My name is May-Ann. I am the director for Multilateral Relations at Access Partnership and also the president of the Internet Society Singapore. And we are here to chat with Chris a little bit about the Internet Society Foundation's enablement of a secure and open internet. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit currently, what are the challenges to a safe and secure internet, and how have the threats and the challenges and solutions changed perhaps over time, and is Internet Society doing with this challenge?
Yeah, well, so look, we're at the beginning of a new 5-year strategy focused on connecting people, but connecting people to a safe and secure internet. And that last bit for us is really, really important. And although it's a very complex question, I can really break that down into two areas of work that we do. One is in securing the technology itself. So we strongly believe that encryption is fundamental in driving a safe and secure internet. End-to-end encryption that's there within the basis of the internet itself is important for us. So we do a lot of work such as Global Encryption Day, where we support a broad range of other partners to try and promote encryption at both the business and individual level and explain to people the importance of that. And we also do a certain amount of work from a policy perspective, whether that's encouraging governments to understand and support encryption at end-to-end levels, but also sometimes amicus briefs at the Supreme Court, etc. So a lot of it is from the kind of regulatory infrastructural basis, where we're trying to make sure that the internet people use and the internet people get every day is as safe and secure as possible. But then there's also the main reason why there are cybersecurity issues, which is individuals and the way we understand what cybersecurity means and how we protect ourselves when we're online. But this is where a lot of the work of our chapters comes in. So this is not only explaining to people what tools and applications they can use to make the internet secure, but also understanding what risks there are. So I was in Kenya in November, speaking to Ruth, an amazing woman who's come through our training programs, the Internet Society, starting with deploying and designing computer networks to become the chief technical officer for a brilliant tender organization, which supplies Wi-Fi and connectivity to Kibera, which is a slum area of Nairobi. And they run training for women to be safe online. So this is not just, as I say, understanding how you protect yourself from a technological perspective, but also understanding what safety means in interaction with other people and with other communities online as well. So for us, it's both of those aspects. It is the cybersecurity and the technology side, but a safer internet is also understanding what good and acceptable behavior online is and how you manage that for yourself and your community.
And it sounds like the programs that you've just shared, they're not just for large scale government application kind of thing. You just mentioned Africa, and that seems like a very individual, your responsibility is your own and you have to do it. So it's both on the government level policy side as well as an individual level. Is that the programs that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us in the Internet Society, the unit of action is the community. Unit of action is that kind of grassroots.
I like that unit of action.
Whether it's from a connectivity perspective, where we really drive community connectivity as our main way of connecting the last few billion in the world, but also that understanding how that community themselves understand what maintaining a safe and secure internet means for them. Because more than anything, this drives demand. So, I've been personally involved in trying to bring internet connectivity to people for the last 15 years in my career. Coverage is there, but people aren't necessarily connecting. So understanding what that demand is that drives people comes from our community approach. But also there's a resilience there as well. If you have a local community which has genuinely designed and built their own internet and are helping understand how to keep it safe, and when there are shocks, when there are issues, when there are natural disasters, actually the community can bring it back online. And we've seen that in some of our networks from a connectivity perspective. When there have been natural disasters, the community networks have often come back online quicker than the major telcos have, because you build that resilience and that knowledge into the community.
Thanks. Chris, you mentioned this thing really interesting, which is connecting that final million people that we haven't really actually connected. How are we doing on those statistics? I think that we always want to see organizations like Internet Society Foundation, Internet Society, and all of the chapters, of course, working on community networks. But this achievement of universal connectivity seems to be an elusive goal. How are we doing on it? Because let's face it, there has been progress. I think I want to make sure that it's a happy story. There has been progress, but how are we doing on it?
I'd say, look, the numbers are disputed. That last billion seems to have been remarkably robust over the last 15 years of my working
Resistance.
career. It feels like we're always talking about the last billion, and they don't seem to be kind of going away. And again, this is where I think our approach really pays dividends. I think we've done that we can do more, but I think we've done most of the big top-down solutions now. So whether you're looking at fiber, whether you're looking at mobile, or whether you're looking at satellite, bringing community to physically hard-to-reach communities is getting easier and better and more affordable than it ever has been before. Still a huge amount of work to be done there, and policymakers play a significant role in that. But I think coverage is getting better and better and better, but connectivity isn't. And that's why I say the community as a unit of action for us really works, because I think explaining to people the value of bringing the internet into their lives, looking at how you train people and bring a digital literacy into people's lives, those are the barriers as much as the technological barriers we're overcoming now. They are cultural. How do you make sure that people feel safe and able to use the internet within their cultures and their communities locally? Literacy, how do you bring digital literacy to populations that might not have traditional literacy? How do you explain what the value is to people's lives at an economic and social benefit? How do people understand the way that having an internet connection helps your life if you're a farmer or if you're a sustenance worker and so forth? And I think we are seeing a lot of that happening. But for us, that's why that unit of action is at the very, very community level, because that's the hard miles now. We will not, I think, connect the last billion just by putting more satellites into space. The solution isn't a nice, pretty global map. The solution is actually more of a patchwork quilt of lots of quite nuanced projects, understanding the differences in those communities and what they need to see in the internet to make it meaningful in their life.
I think that's where the Internet Society chapters are actually coming into play, right? Because these are the local, plugging into the local community people that are actually from the community itself, that unit of action that you mentioned, right?
Yeah, I would say to people, the key word in the title of the Internet Society isn't the first one, it's the second one.
That's a very good.
That society is actually what we're trying to build.
So with this society that we're trying to build, one of the things which I've always been curious about, especially in these recent months, is this grant writing process and the grant application process. Given the global state of affairs right now, we've seen some of the funding dry up, etc. What advice would you have for the chapters or people who are applying to the Internet Society Foundation, for example, for grants? Because it is getting harder to justify. What would you be looking for in terms of the impact stories, in terms of making sure that we actually get to the heart of what we want to be focusing on? I love what you mentioned just now. The coverage is okay for internet connectivity, but really it's the connectivity of the last mile, that last bit that we are working on. What advice would you have for somebody who's writing a grant for this?
So look for the impact and look at how you measure impact. I think, we're very lucky that even in an environment where lots of donors at the national level are moving away from providing grant programs, that's not an issue for the Internet Society. We're incredibly lucky to have public internet registry as a core funding source, which is giving us the money and will continue to give us the money to drive Internet Society's work and drive funding to chapters and projects. So the first thing is, we're in a very, very, very lucky situation at the moment. So many NGOs are struggling for funding and so many grant application processes will be closing down and we're not. Actually, hopefully we will be expanding, because what we're able to do this year is bring other donors into our funding pots, and we're looking at partnering with other NGOs to create co-fund pots that will allow us to actually give more to NGOs and chapters that we work with. But the fundamental thing for us is measurement and impact. We're at the beginning of a new 5-year strategy to 2030 with the Internet Society, and one of the most fundamental things we're looking to do in the way we work and in the way that we want to work with the community is measuring that impact in a meaningful way. Being able to strengthen the Internet Society as a global actor will mean us being able to talk about the impact we have in the world. So show how you're going to measure impact. Measuring impact can mean we got 2 policymakers in a room for an IGF and they went back and talked about that. We're not looking for everyone to bring us thousands and thousands of numbers would be amazing if people were. But, but being able to actively say, a grant was received to run a local IGF and we had X participants, and then we had this feedback and local members of the regulatory community were able to participate and understand more. And that's what the output was. That is absolutely as amazing and valid as we ran a community network and connected a community of 2,000 people. All of these things are really fundamental to bring out the impact of the Internet Society as a global community. But we do need to be able to report back and measure that. And what we're going to be doing is providing more funding to chapters to help train chapters and develop that skill. We have a strong measurement team within the Internet Society and the Foundation, and they will take the bulk of this work on. But to get good data from the chapters, we realize we need to support chapters more. So we'll be doing a lot more funding to help train chapters to do that impact measurement and be able to produce data that shows the massive impact that we have as a global community.
Thank you for sharing that. As somebody who has been very much in the measurement and impact assessment community and been working on this for quite a bit part of my career, I think I'm really heartened to hear that there'll be more capacity building in this, because I do think that the stories that we tell are actually pretty good. It would be great if we could be telling them a lot more longitudinally. I mean, some of the projects that I've done, one of the pieces that I've done is the Cloud Readiness Index. And we've measured that over 10 years, the impact that it's had actually just to get that statistics over 10 years has been quite phenomenal, been cited quite a lot. And I think that is a skill that I think a lot more people could do with. So I'm really happy to hear that Internet Society is actually going to be investing in some of that capacity building.
And it's hard, right? We talk about the last billion. Part of the reason why it's a stubborn last billion is globally none of us can agree how to measure it properly. So
the last billion.
That sounds like a nice number. Right? We don't actually know how many people are unconnected. So being able to contribute to that story is going to be important for us.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today. We really, really appreciate you coming in and visiting us and sharing with us some of the tips and tricks, I guess, for the next lap of development work, especially with internet connectivity around the world. Thank you very much for joining us, also all of you who are online, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.